actually really significant development that we wanted to make sure to bring you. So Joe Biden, for the first time, personally indicated openness to getting rid of the Senate filibuster. Now, as recently as the Democratic primary, he was saying that he was opposed to getting rid of it. So the fact that he has moved on this issue is a big deal in terms of what he may actually be able to accomplish in the Senate. By the way, as it looks more and more like Democrats are pretty likely to take the majority, that of course is uncertain, but moving in that direction. He said that whether or not he gets rid of the filibuster or advocates for that, it's up to the Senate, not to him. But it's going to depend on how obstreperous they become, good word there. But I think you're going to just have to take a look at it. He also said, I do think we've reached a point, a real inflection in American history, and I don't believe it's unlike what Roosevelt was met with. I think we have an opportunity to make some real systemic change. So this has potentially really far-reaching consequences for what actually unfolds under his administration.
It's a huge deal. And the reason why, in particular, is because we know from other open source reporting is that Biden has been talking a lot with Chuck Schumer. So actually, the New York Post reported earlier this week that Biden and Schumer have been gaming out what a first 100 days agenda is going to look like for them legislatively. Right now, the only thing that they've really floated is immigration, and I assume some sort of economic response. However, we don't, again, know what exactly that's going to look like. Like Schumer, as far as I know, has not been publicly taking a stance on the filibuster reform, or at least on nuking the filibuster, as far as I know. But what I do know is he's not as much of a Senate traditionalist as Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has come under a tremendous amount of pressure from the right, telling him, nuke the filibuster in order to get something passed during the Trump administration. He's absolutely refused to do it. The fact that Biden is signaling opening to this is very significant for how legislation could actually move within the country, especially as it increasingly looks as if the House is going to stay Democratic and if the Senate flips to the Democrats as well, which again looks not, I would say, likely at this point based on public polling. And I know he would come under a tremendous amount of pressure in order to do something about it if Biden were to become president. So the fact that he's not ruling it out entirely, I don't think we can overstate how big of a deal this is for the country.
Yeah, and we had already heard some murmurings from one of his aides, said basically maybe we'll look at this. So that was the first indication that maybe he had shifted on this issue. I mean, it also sounds like he's sort of setting this up as a little bit of leverage for Republicans to try to work with him a little bit so that they don't completely nuke the filibuster, so that they do have some say and some sway under a Biden administration if it is a Biden administration, if the Senate does flip, both of which, again, are looking more and more likely. We did get another look at some of the potential priorities of a Biden administration yesterday. He announced a $2 trillion sort of climate change and environmental green jobs package, which actually, you know, it did represent significant movement from both the dollar amount that he had floated during the primary that he was going to be focused on spending on creating green jobs and green energy. It did represent some movement towards the activist position. Now, look, as we always say here, great policy plans are one thing. What are your priorities? What are you actually going to fight for? What's going to be the day one agenda? But what activists really noted is that there was a connection, and this is really different from the way the Democrats have talked about climate before, that this wasn't like, oh, this separate side initiative. It was framed in the vein of this is part of how we're actually going to recover economically, and the economic piece of it was really put at the center of what they were planning there. So a little more insight into some of what maybe the priorities would be under a Biden administration. As with all these things, we'll believe it when we see it.
That's the real. I'm like, I just don't know with this guy, right? It's like the only thing I know is he's bringing in the worst actors from the Obama administration for foreign policy. And the reason that you can count on that is you don't need Congress to get any of that stuff done. Once you're the commander in chief, you're going to revert right back. On the economic front, I couldn't tell you. I mean, the Buy American plan, I thought it was good. There were some, flaws that I thought generally within it, especially saying being open to TPP. The green thing, like you said, who has any idea? Is this campaign rhetoric? Obama used to promise he was going to pull NAFTA. He could pull out of NAFTA like day 100 of his presidency. Remember, he's like, we're going to renegotiate NAFTA. I was going back and watching some of his 08 speeches. I'm like, that didn't work out, right? So, again, I have no idea what this man will actually do in his first 100 days. Well, I think they'll probably get back into Paris. I think they'll rescind a bunch of Trump executive orders. Outside of going back to 2012, I don't see anything.
So the other question for me is, we're in this moment right now where it's still popular and still, even though they're dragging their feet, even though they're not here, there is some movement towards an economic stimulus, right? From the right and from the left, some movement in that direction. So that's the moment we're in now. And what the Biden team seems to be projecting is we're going to continue that push. We're going to continue to focus on the economy, on stimulus, on recovery, on creating jobs. They've floated a government-created jobs program, nowhere near what like a federal jobs guarantee would be, but they floated something like 100,000 jobs. But when he's actually inaugurated, if he's inaugurated, we're going to be in a different moment. And what we've seen from Joe Biden over the course of his career is he's very susceptible to this like deficit hawk, debt hawkishness stance. So that whole like you got to balance the budget and we got to be responsible. Throughout his career, over decades, one of the most consistent principles is that he has been very susceptible to that whole notion and that whole idea. You don't have to go back like to the 80s or the 90s when he wanted to cut Social Security and Medicare, as the Sanders team pointed out. Go back to the Obama administration when Joe Biden was one of the people who was really trying to make the grand bargain deal with Republicans that did include floating cuts to Social Security, because he and Barack Obama were very much influenced by the Tea Party rhetoric around balancing the budget and deficits and debt and all of that. So what he's saying now is very comfortable and fits in the moment that we exist in now. Will he still feel that way? Will he still push in that direction when we're in a different political moment? And for sure that the moment that a Democratic president is elected, the Republicans will all flip to their Heritage Foundation talking points about the debt and the deficit.
So that is I think the most key point that you're making is that he's really a political chameleon with no ideology whatsoever. He kind of goes along with, outside
he's got like
of
a series of slogans.
Yeah, he's got slogans. He believes in America, whatever that means. And then he also is like, it's all about compromise, an institutionalist kind of the old school, in which you're moving along and you're trying to like constantly bring something together, regardless of whatever the moral position is of that. And so I think that is actually what I think he will move forward in the direction of more than anything in his presidency. Wherever the political winds shift, that's where Biden is going to be. And when I say political winds, I don't mean of the public, the elite class. Wherever the elite class shifts around in their positions, that is what I think government policy will be under Joe Biden.
Yeah, and he still assumes that he's working with good actors and with people who are acting in good faith, which is a very faulty assumption.
From anybody in Washington.
And it's part of what led the Obama administration to many of the failures that they had during their term. We will see. All right, more Rising for you after this.